The Kursk region in the Russian Federation has become one of the most intense battlegrounds on the front line. The enemy isn't holding back, rolling in with a massive arsenal of equipment and troops. They mean business. At the forefront of their assault, tanks equipped with heavy-duty mine rollers plow through, carving clear paths for their advancing forces. This isn't just a hit and run, it's a calculated storm, hitting hard with 6 relentless waves of attack, one after the other. Each wave feels like a punch, straight to the front line, unyielding and unstoppable. The Russians are throwing everything they've got at the Ukrainian defense, desperate to break through a stronghold that stood firm for over 6 months. This battlefield has already claimed hundreds of Russian tanks, turning the area into a graveyard of steel and smoke. But here's the twist. The more firepower they pile into the assault, the bigger the bullseye they paint on themselves. For artillery teams and FPV drone operators, it's
in this episode, the Russian Buk M1 air defense system noticed the threat and immediately tried to flee as far as possible from its position. The FPV drone managed to slightly damage its right track, but the vehicle continued to flee quickly along the road, with no time for another kamikaze drone to launch. The pilot of another drone begins the pursuit and starts dropping explosives on the enemy vehicle while it's on the move. Despite the high speed and wind, the pilot managed to accurately drop the explosives directly onto the missile payload, triggering a chain reaction of spectacular explosions that completely destroyed the Russian vehicle along with its crew. Even more ingenuity and skill are required for operations that involve tracking and destroying rare and expensive equipment that doesn't approach the front line. For example, on this section of the front, the 37th Marine Brigade, with the help of drones, mines, and artillery, managed to repel several waves of the Russian offensive and reduce dozens of Russian vehicles to ashes. This APC was initially hit by a drone. The armored vehicle came to a halt and its ammunition began to detonate. Seconds later, an artillery shell landed nearby. On another section of the front, a valuable specimen was also successfully destroyed. The Russians thought they had deployed their Pantsir S-1 air defense system at a safe distance. Such equipment is typically capable of protecting itself from most aerial threats. The FPV pilot had only one chance to take down such a rare beast, and he didn't miss. Unfortunately, not all such operations end successfully. Of course, destroying a tank equipped with additional protection against mines and drones requires more than one kamikaze drone. However, it's still a very favorable exchange. A drone costing less than $1,000 against a steel machine worth millions. With a well-placed hit, the first drone can completely immobilize enemy equipment or even cause a fire. Just a few minutes later, its counterpart will finish the job. In this offensive, Russian forces lost a total of over 50 pieces of various equipment, including tanks, APCs, and even quad bikes. Some of the equipment was abandoned by the Russians in panic on the battlefield, and instead of using one-time kamikaze drones, the Ukrainians slowly finished it off using explosive drops. But it's too early for the FPV operators to rest, as there is still work to be done. They need to eliminate those who are still trying to flee the battlefield after a failed assault. This Russian APC managed to break away from its comrades and even continued moving after the first explosion, but the next drone managed to break through the armored vehicle's defenses, and the crew had to abandon it to avoid being burned alive inside after the final strike. In this video, we can observe how the drone pilot almost managed to take down a Russian helicopter. While we've previously shown footage of such successes, this time success was just within reach. But luck wasn't on their side. In the Donetsk direction, the Russian army continues to systematically assault Ukrainian positions every day. These two armored vehicles attempted to quickly dash along the road but ran into mines and heavy artillery fire. As the smoke clears, it becomes evident that this time they didn't manage to break far through the Ukrainian defenses. The vehicles have been stopped, which means it's the perfect moment to finish them off with a strike group of drones. Russia has a lot of resources at its disposal, but it would be wrong to assume that the loss of military equipment doesn't matter to them. Therefore, every destroyed APC, tank, or vehicle, especially under the conditions of sanctions, is felt many times more than the loss of 100 soldiers. The abandoned Russian T-72 tank is filled with ammunition. The Ukrainians know this and send a drone with a cumulative projectile to target it. The drone performs its task excellently, but that's not enough. The operator decides to destroy another abandoned Russian tank and sends a drone to target it. Unfortunately, the tank remained undamaged, as the drone was equipped with a regular grenade. The operator then decided to use another drone with a cumulative projectile. And of course, the result was successful. Such a cumulative grenade can easily penetrate up to 60 millimeters of armor, meaning any Russian tank can be destroyed, especially if it still carries ammunition. Look at this example. This Russian tank has just set out on a mission and is filled with ammunition, but it is being pursued by a Ukrainian drone with a cumulative grenade. One hit, and it's the end for the tank. The crew of this vehicle also abandoned it just minutes before there was nothing left of their transport. Such a small drone, yet such colossal power inside, but only under one condition: if it's piloted by an experienced operator. FPV drones have proven themselves very effectively in modern warfare, but more traditional methods still work very well. But it's not only mines that can be hidden. In this case, the Ukrainians discreetly placed an FPV drone near the road, and when an enemy vehicle appeared nearby, they quickly launched their explosive bird into the air and destroyed the enemy, a very clever and effective method. This tank seemed like it was about to leave the battlefield unharmed, but just one cleverly hidden mine in the right spot ended its journey for good. Another APC crew attempted to take a different route, but couldn't avoid the minefield either, as the damage turned out to be so critical that fire immediately began to engulf the entire hull. First, the APC driver veered off the field towards some trees and came to a halt. Moments later, it was caught by a Ukrainian FPV drone. Another vehicle stopped nearby to pick up survivors, but the chosen spot for the stop turned out to be a very unfortunate one. This Russian armored vehicle also had to feel the impact of a Ukrainian FPV drone. The soldiers didn't hurry to leave the APC. Possibly they didn't even plan to abandon it, but it was already too late. Tanks and APCs are priority targets. But if there's an opportunity to strike a truck or light vehicle used to transport soldiers or deliver ammunition, Ukrainian forces won't miss it, especially since the armor on such vehicles is several times weaker, usually requiring just a single, well-placed hit to destroy them. Give a thumbs up to the Ukrainian soldiers for their ingenuity. Nevertheless, even with the extensive use of drones, armored vehicles and tanks remain one of the main means of conducting offensive military operations. A Russian assault group advanced on the positions of Ukrainian defense forces in the Touretsk direction. For the attack, the enemy deployed several units of armored vehicles. One of the enemy's APCs was successfully hit with an FPV drone. After this, the crew was forced to abandon the APC and flee to the nearest settlement to hide. Some managed to get into another vehicle, but it too was not meant to go far. After it was also hit, the driver lost control and crashed into a tree nearby. Now, this crew too has to find shelter on their own. The surviving Russian soldiers managed to abandon the vehicle almost in the last seconds before the explosion. But this time, the cause of the explosion was not a kamikaze drone, but something much more powerful. While the Russians were circling the outskirts, looking for a place to hide, a tank had already arrived to assist the Ukrainian drone operators and began targeting both the vehicles and the buildings where the enemy infantry had tried to take cover. Even if the Russian armored vehicles were still intact, they would have little chance of winning in a fight against a Ukrainian tank in such conditions. And when the enemy was left without the cover of heavy equipment, their only hope was that they could find somewhere to hide and wait out the battle. Relying on drones was also futile, as by the time they reached them, there would be no cover left, and the Ukrainian tank would most likely have already left the battlefield. The biggest mistake was the very attempt to capture this position without adequate cover, and without sufficient information about the Ukrainian forces in this location. And for their mistake, the Russians paid the highest price, losing both soldiers' lives and equipment. Give a thumbs up to the Ukrainian military for reacting so quickly to the danger and completely turning the tide of the battle in their favor. With the help of one tank, several FPVs, and expert planning, they were able to hold the position and completely disrupt the Russian plans for an offensive on these positions. At the beginning of the Russian invasion of Ukraine in 2022, Ukrainian soldiers tried to capture as much trophy equipment as possible while they had the chance. However, over time, the battles became more of a war at a distance. And now we can observe that most of the damage on both sides is inflicted by various types of unmanned systems, primarily FPV drones.